If you are thinking of a bank that takes care of customers' needs by providing quality services with flexibility, reliability, and innovation, think Trust Bank Limited. With Trust Bank Limited mobile banking, you enjoy services such as balance inquiry, mini statement, funds transfer between accounts, exchange rates, mobile airtime top-up, stop ATM card, checkbook request, and PIN change. Our real-time gross settlement allows the customer to instruct the bank to transfer funds from their account to another account at another bank. Our expertise and experience in international banking is both legendary and the envy of the market. Retail banking, one bank, different amazing packages. Whether you are interested in savings account, current account, time or fixed deposit account, lending or overdraft, our team of dedicated staff is always ready and willing to help you out with your transactions as you wish. Corporate banking. Trust Bank Limited offer the most convenient services for deposit accounts, credit facilities, trade finance, bond and guarantee, and foreign currency account. With e-banking, you can make electronic bill payments and online banking and enjoy 24-hour access to your cash with our ATM. With the largest network of branches and agents, we give you the convenience to receive funds as you please. Trust Bank Limited, proudly Gambian.
fay lempo warugal la si képp koo xam ne doomi réew mi nga ak ñu fi dëkk bu fekkee ne ci at mi sa koom-koom weesu na $2,400 dalasi mbete weer bu nekk di nga am lu tollu si $2,000 dalasi lempo si la nguur gi di sukkandiku ngir liggéey yokkute réew mi GRA mooy banxaas bu nguuri Gambia sas ngir mu fayeku lépp luy lempo ci biir réew mi ba tax na GRA di yëgal faykati lempo yi ne warugal la pour ñu fay lu ñu naan withholding tax on contract payment maanaam bépp contrat bu waay joxe te si biir réew mi lañu toog kon xaalisi contrat bi ngeen nangotoo war nga cee wàññi ci xayma téeméer bu nekk fukka bu fekkee ne contrat bi dëkkut ci biir réew mi bu boobaa di nga war a wàññi téeméer bu nekk fukka ak juróom lii mooy lempo bu ñu naan withholding tax on contract payment lii mooy lempo bi nga xam ne yow mi joxe contrat warugal la nga wëlbatiku dem fay ko ci maakaani GRA tax office bu la gën a jege mbete ci banque yi GRA jagleel pour fay lempo war ngaa jéebal lempo bi si diiri fukki fan ak juróom gannaaw bi nga wàññee ci xaalis si contrat bi amul benn contracto bu ñu teggil fay lempo bi xanaa mu fekk ne nguuri Gambia ñoo ko jéegale boole si projet yi nga xam ne mbootaay ndimbali ñoo koy dépense GRA di fayeku lempo ngir yokk.
For the first time in the history of the Gambia, Gambia Printing Publishing Corporation proudly introduces the Biliomatic exercise book printing machine. The machine has the capacity to print more than 20,000 books per hour. Yes, 20,000 books per hour. It also prints magazines, newspapers, calendars, flyers, normal books, and all kinds of printed documents, plus items at affordable prices. With the Biliomatic printing machine, GPPC can now render high quality and non-size restricted printing service supply across the sub-region. Rush now and partner with GPPC for all your public and private printing service needs. Print with us today and you'd be offered highly professional, reliable and efficient service delivery by our team of experts. The Gambia Printing and Publishing Corporation is here to meet all demands and is reliable at all times. For more info, contact us on 437-4493 or 437-4402. GPPC is Gambian and it's yours.
In communication, connectivity is everything. We ensure that the links never sleep. Quantities and qualities, all in our data service, providing efficient reliable voice, and data service. We believe if you're not up to speed, then you're going backwards. Communications have to flow as fast as the speed of light. Whatever business you're in, having someone who understands your needs is critical. That is why we just don't offer you technology, we offer you solutions. Enjoy Gamcel's internet broadband anytime, anywhere. Your national operator, Gamcel. Yeah.
This is Kerr Fatou. Fatou.
And welcome to another edition of also Kerr Fatou. Again, it's another Thursday, and it's going to be an interesting panel tonight. Of course, we're going to talk about the government white paper. You know that the TRRC report has been submitted to government. They had up to 6 months to look at it and come up with a white paper, which came up yesterday afternoon actually. And of course, a lot of reactions to the white paper. But to discuss all of this, we lawyered up only. We really lawyered up today, right? We have lawyer Lamin Darboe here. We have Abdoulie Fati, and of course, gender activist Fatou Baldeh MBE. Of course, Esa and Oli. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Fatou. Thank you. Today, definitely the discussion would be on legal matters, I would say, because having Mr. Fati here and Mr. Darboe, they would definitely educate us on what the white paper really translates, because I know we will definitely get into that. There's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of lawyers coming here. Lawyer did not sit in any classroom. They have their own interpretation. They have their own explanation of what this means and all these legal terms. So I think it's very right to have learned people who at least have the know-how and the knowledge of what this white paper translates to. At least they can explain for the layman and layperson to understand. And again, we welcome Fatou. We've seen the work that she's been doing, and with the white paper, definitely there's been a section on gender violence and all of that. So having her here is definitely a great addition to today's panel discussion. So we look forward to having a very fruitful and educative discussion.
Esther, we are going to do less talking today. Yeah, we have the experts here, but your reaction when you watch the release of the white paper?
Actually, I must say also that, in fact, I wasn't expecting that it was going to be broadcasted live. Yes. I did not know that it was going to be an event, sort of. Otherwise, I would have marched to the Sadauda Karaba Conference Center, because it was a historic moment for the Gambia. I would have been part of at least those that witnessed it. But then I joined online to watch it, and I must say that I was really impressed. It's a right decision taken by the government. When I was listening to the Attorney General, the flow, the way he was flowing, actually I concluded that I think it's it's going to be positive for the victims. What we expected in terms of implementation of the recommendations will be done. But then I was also having this mind also to say it's not only about the white paper being released. It's one thing for the white paper to be released, because that's about commitment to implement, but it's also about actions. After the commitment to saying we are going to do this, government accepts the TRRC recommendations. What is more important here now is the action for the government to actually do the implementation, because like they always say, justice must not only be done, but it must seem to be done. This is what Gambians are expecting at the end of the day. So I think I will say, it was really a historic moment for the Gambia, and the government did the right thing by, saying that 99.2% of the recommendations of the TRRC will be implemented, and that Attorney General, from his own words, this is historic in the history of truth commissions around the world. So I think that it's a step in the right direction.
And Fatou, welcome to Kerr Fatou for the first time. Fatou is the chair of the TJ Working Group that works with the victims. And of course, is the founder of Wales, and we want to welcome you. Now, first and foremost, what is the reaction? You work with the victims. What was their reaction when government released the white paper?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And at the Sada or the Kairaba, we actually went with some of the victims to witness this. And as you know, for some victims, they didn't even believe this was going to happen. The anxiety. So being there, just seeing the victims rejoice at the announcement, but also seeing that indication of government's willingness to do something around the TRRC recommendations was a good feeling for the victims. Some of them actually cried, saying that, oh, they believe us, they are taking us seriously. So it was beautiful seeing that.
Well, great. I think I've seen both lawyers' reaction, but we are going to get in details. But Lamin, your reaction, I mean, Lamin is one person, everybody says, when everybody is in one side, he's on the opposite. But for the first time, Lamin, this one, I saw your article on Standard newspaper. You were really, you were, what's the word do I use? You really were in support of what the government paper brought in. We will get into the details, but your reaction to what was released yesterday?
Well, like everyone said, it was a historic moment. This was almost half a century, sorry, a quarter of a century coming. What happened in 1994 in the country could have been very positive, but unfortunately, it turned out into a nightmare. And during all those years, people were just victimized and nobody could do anything about it because it was the apparatus of the state that was used to heap so much havoc on ordinary citizens throughout this country. So a lot of people would have thought we would never witness a day like this, that in fact those mighty, powerful people who were in collaboration with the former president could be held to account. I think the lesson we should all learn from this is that power is a public garment. It's not your clothes. It's given to you by the public. So at the end of the day, you just have to utilize power properly in a dignified manner without descending into so much atrocious conduct. But I'm glad, I'm very happy that at the end of the day, the implementation will take place. So like everybody else, I'm thrilled.
I'm thrilled. Abdoulie, I know you worked, I mean, I don't know if we're supposed to unveil that here or not, but I do know that you worked with the TRRC at some point as consultant. And was this what you expected from the government, to accept almost everything?
Ordinarily, that is what I had expected, but I had hoped, but did not expect the level of acceptance. So almost 100%, 95+% acceptance is really sort of unprecedented. So you know, I had hoped that perhaps 75, 80% acceptance would be a good thing for victims. So so to get 95% plus is really a strong indication of government's willingness and commitment on paper to fully implement the recommendation. So so it was really a historic moment. In the fact that the TRRC was mandated to really inquire into a very dark period of our history, to unearth the truth, identify those who bear the greatest responsibility, and make appropriate recommendations. So for those recommendations now to be accepted almost on a wholesome basis gives a strong indication of commitment, but also sort of sends a signal that whatever you do in terms of serious human rights violations and abuses, no matter how long it takes, it looks like the globe is now coming closer in terms of making sure violations in respect of human rights violations, people are always accountable for their actions. So yesterday was a really historic day in the history of our country, so far as public inquiry is concerned.
Wow. So before we get into the specifics. I want us to clarify this. Like I said, we are lawyered up. There's been argument on from different corners that whether the government should accept or reject, because the TRRC is a corporate body, and their role, government's role here is limited to implement the recommendations. What is your take on that argument? First, before we get into what is accepted and what is not accepted.
Well, the word implement itself is wide enough to say that it includes not only the implementation, but also government's own reaction. It didn't say that there, but of course there would be a laguna, really, in a situation like this. If it was set up as a commission, true, is not commission of inquiry as in the Constitution. This was set up by statute, but of course there are characters in it that approximates the characters of the commissions of inquiries that are set up under Section 200 of the Constitution. Yes. So, and also they have to make their recommendations to the president. That in itself shows that the government should have a role in the not only in the implementation, but because you can say the implementation also would include setting up a strategy to prosecute. You know, all those can come under the authority of the government. If you say the government has no authority to either accept or reject the recommendations of the TRRC, there will be a laguna there, a big one. And we don't want that kind of situation where nobody, something happens and nobody can intervene in it. And so the government is going to set up the Special Prosecution Department at the Ministry of Justice. That is not only implementation, but it also has to look at other aspects. So I believe it fits within the implementation scheme. If you give it a wider ambit, it fits within it.
But Mr. Darboe, it says here, the government shall within 6 months following the submission of the report issue a white paper containing its proposed plan on the implementation of the recommendation in the Gazette. So is that not a clear statement saying that it didn't say it can reject or accept? It says the government should issue a white paper in the proposed on the proposed plan on how they want to implement the recommendations that have been gazetted. That's what the Act says.
Well, it says on how it wants to implement.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that the word implementation, since these things are not defined, I think there are intermediate steps there. And the government, of course, would have to look at the overall policy of why it set up the TRRC. And, you know, and we would have to move forward with that policy in mind. So if you leave the TRRC to its own devices without any check at all, the government at the end of the day would have to bear responsibility for whatever the TRRC did.
Yeah.
If the TRRC said, we don't believe any of these witnesses, I mean, in a situation like that, what is going to happen? Yeah.
But the TRRC can be sued, because we have seen that Edward Singate has sued the TRRC, right? Is that right? As a body, it can be sued also, right?
Yeah, but that's like any other public
body. Okay.
You know, it's like, you know, it's like when you sue, we sue in the Minister of Finance.
Yeah.
You know, we sue in the Clerk of the National Assembly. You know, the Attorney General all the time. So that in terms of a corporate body, that is just to that is just given that legal personality. But in terms of the language of the proposal of the roadmap of the steps that government would take in terms of implementation, I would believe that the white paper and what will be contained in the white paper as to how government intends, like it was stated yesterday, creating a special prosecution team, and also a judicial framework, how that would inform the criminal accountability process in terms of prosecutions. So, see, TRRC was created not like the Janneh Commission, where the president relied on a specific provision of the Constitution to establish a commission inquiry. TRRC was a little bit different because it was more specific. The National Assembly passed a bill, ultimately, an act, TRRC Act, establishing this independent body to inquire 1994 to January 2017, make recommendations. There's also the Commission of Inquiry Act. I think it's almost about 100 years old. It's about 1913, 1919 or something like, but colonial law. It relates to the same thing as well. But in all of these as well, commissions of inquiries are not courts of law. They are merely investigative processes where they simply make recommendations. TRRC is not a court of law, so even those who appeared before the TRRC, even in the issue relating to evidence, the presentation and the admissibility of evidence, TRRC is completely different to how you have in a proper court of law. TRRC, in terms of threshold, would be on a balance of probability. In a court of law, it's beyond, in a criminal trial, be beyond reasonable doubt. So therefore, Parliament wouldn't have passed an act to say that this is and TRRC was also a civil process as opposed to a criminal process. And therefore, at the end of this inquiry, whatever the recommendation they make is mandatorily binding on the state. It doesn't make any sense. And no legislation, something like it, would be, because TRRC's job is simply to look, investigate and make recommendations. Government has to now respond in terms of producing a white paper, which happened yesterday. So that means that is now government's policy position in respect of this. So obviously TRRC would make certain recommendations that, like the Honorable Minister was saying, in relation to the former two Chief Justices. So for example, government is now looking at its bilateral relationship with Nigeria, is looking at the political and diplomatic implications with Nigeria, and therefore decided. And therefore Parliament would not thrust that duty on government by force to say whatever any commission of inquiry or whatever TRRC recommended must be accepted. So people making this argument, with the greatest respect to them, I think this is really, because you can look at any provision and make a certain, but to say that to implement, because even the white paper in itself, because remember when TRRC, the report was submitted, within a month the government was mandated to publish that happened, I think, around the 25th of December or 24th of December. Then within 6 months it ought to be, but this report ought to also go to the Secretary General of the UN and stuff like that. So even what happened yesterday, in a way, is part of that implementation process by either accepting and rejecting those recommendations. And also, the minister was telling us yesterday, the roadmap. I'm going to set up a special prosecution. I'm going to do it. So those are the proposals by government in terms of how they intend to address the recommendation. So I think what government did here is consistent what is contained in the TRRC Act. But to say that whatever was contained in that document, because there are certain things that even
even the layman will say some of these things. But okay, now that we passed that stage, now the two key things that were contained in the white paper is prosecution and ban from public office. Now let's start with the former president.
Let me say this. Maybe
Go
I'll
ahead.
ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Just in agreement with them. I'm not a lawyer, but then, I mean, it doesn't make sense if one says that whatever is in the recommendation should be implemented. then I think even the term recommendations will not have been used. Probably it would have been orders, because orders are meant to be implemented. But if you say recommendations, even the language there to say the government's proposed plan to implement the recommendations doesn't mean that everything there has to be implemented.
It's a proposal.
It's just a proposal. So the proposal is the ones that the commission has recommended to say do this, that, and that. That is what the government will make plans, propose plans to implement. So I think if it is about just fully implementing whatever is there, they wouldn't have used the word recommendation. It would have been orders, I would think.
In fact, at the end of the day, obviously the courts would have the final say.
Exactly.
The TRRC can only make recommendations. It's not a court of law. So its mandate is really to investigate. And then we are all heading in the same direction. Even if you say the government overstep its functions, the fact is where the TRRC is leading is where the government is also leading, to the courts. Exactly. Yes, and no court, I believe, would say, okay, we are not going to prosecute so and so because the government recommends it. In fact, in most of the cases, you can say the government just went along with what the TRRC recommended. Yes. So obviously, I can't see anything happening here that would derail the recommendations of the government. Because at the end of the day, really, the ultimate decision, testing the evidence, is the mandate, is in the province, within the province of the courts.
And even in that case, it's not like, just say if, like the TRRC said, former VP Njai said this will be prosecuted, doesn't mean that he is guilty already. Okay, so he has to go to court, right? The court will have to decide whether he is guilty or not. So the TRRC is making a recommendation, and the government is saying, we accept, we're going to implement, but the final say is with the courts at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, interesting.
It cannot even, just very briefly, it cannot even, because in the Constitution, criminal prosecution, for example, that discretionary power lies with the Attorney General. So regardless of what the TRRC said, at the end of the day, it's up to the Attorney General. Even with the acceptance of this recommendation, it will now be the, well, when I mean Attorney General himself, but the body that he's going to create to look at this, and there may be certain individuals where they've now accepted in principle. But ultimately, they may look at everything and say there may not be sufficient evidence to lead to a successful prosecution, and therefore, not everybody where in terms of the acceptance alone doesn't mean all those people will be ultimately prosecuted as well. I can assure you that.
Wow, interesting. Another interesting. Now let's look at some of the recommendations. The former president Yaya Jammeh to be banned from public office for life, and also to be tried. Now President Jammeh is not in country. What are the legal requirements? What steps do you think should be taken if really the government wants to try him?
Well, it would have to use its diplomatic powers. He's out of the country. You want him in the country so that you can try him here. But the recommendations also said, or the position of the government is said, those who could be reasonably tried in country. So obviously you remember that Charles Taylor was not tried in Liberia. Yes, and there was yes, exactly. There was a reason for that, because President Jammeh, whatever your thoughts about him, has a solid support base, and that support base, I don't know what they would do if you want the trial to happen here. So I believe in his own case, probably the trial would have to take place outside the country. The Gambia would not have the financial resources. So what is going to happen there is that the government would trigger its diplomatic powers and liaise with the United Nations or the countries, international agencies that would want to participate in funding this process. Even the trials that would take place in the Gambia, I believe, are beyond the economic powers of the country. The investigations alone would be very widespread, very intensive. So they're going to be require a lot of money. So obviously, Yahya Jammeh, if he is to be tried, my bet is he wouldn't be tried in the Gambia. Yes, because the security, logistics alone would be a nightmare.
Abdullah, what do you...
Again, yeah, the minister said this, and it's going to be like the special court for Sierra Leone incident where, and I think our approach is almost identical to the special court for Sierra Leone, because I think that's what the minister hinted. We'll also have almost like a special court with a hybrid system, a mixture of international and domestic, and I think all the other individuals will be tried on home soil. But with Yahya Jammeh, I think probably just like the special court for Sierra Leone had a special arrangement with The Hague. He was prosecuted, but not under the ICC or even the ICJ, but under the special court for Sierra Leone, even though he was tried in The Hague. So Gambia too, we may get a similar arrangement in The Hague, or Senegal or Ghana or Sierra Leone, some of the countries that I mentioned. But before we get there, so far, this is government position that he ought to be criminally prosecuted, but he's in Equatorial Guinea. And as far as I know, I don't think that country is a party to the ICC, it's a party to the Rome Statute. I don't think they are. Secondly, I don't think Gambia has any LMA, mutual legal assistance with that country. Yeah. I don't think we also have an extradition treaty arrangement with that country as well. But what we can begin to do, now that government has sort of like almost formalized its position in respect of the recommendation, so maybe issue an international arrest warrant, because this person is now needed. But perhaps that may come at a time when perhaps those bodies have been created and he's perhaps charged, or a person who is of sufficient interest to answer the criminal charges, and therefore an international. But even with the issue of the international arrest warrant, doesn't mean Yahya Jammeh is going to be holidaying from one country to the other. You would still need strong diplomatic and international support with the big countries, the US, Canada, France, and the like, to sort of like, because we cannot do this, even within the African region. But I think somebody like Macky Sall, Senegal may use its influence internationally to leverage on the West to try and begin to put some pressure on here. But ultimately, I think Yahya Jammeh would be caught, and I think he'll be prosecuted. But obviously, for security and domestic and other reasons, and another country.
Fatou, you want to say something on that?
Yes, we're talking in a very legalistic way. I am not a lawyer as well. I've been trying to learn. But also, what does this mean to victims? How do we explain this to victims so that they understand, so that their expectations also are managed? For some victims, they're expecting that the white paper has come out. That means that Yahya Jammeh is going to be tried straight away.
Like tomorrow.
Or the perpetrators are going to be held accountable straight away. So we need to have these conversations and make it very clear. What does this mean? Also, this white paper, as well as the TRRC recommendations, have been out. They are in documents, legal documents, written in English. How do we make sure they are translated in languages that the Gambian as a whole understands? When we talk about the TRRC, we talk about never again. Earlier we were just talking about the recommendations. Some of these recommendations are to do with things that even the government doesn't have to implement. CSOs have role in this. Some of the recommendations are around educating young people, issues around human rights, issues around changing socio-cultural norms, for instance, stigma associated to victims of sexual violence. Those are things that the government can do part of that work, but it's the responsibility of civil society to do another part of that recommendation as well. So you see how the recommendation is not just about prosecutions. There are other aspects to it that have everybody, even the media, communication, changing perceptions around the media. When victims testified, for instance, the attack that female victims had, especially the way that they're framed in the media. But also when it comes to communication, we knew that Yahya Jammeh, for instance, used the media to perpetuate violence. How do we make sure, when we think about recommendations, implementing, and also when we think about the Never Again slogan, we incorporate these issues so that when we say never again, we mean never again at every level, not just at prosecution.
But she brought up something very important. the perception, victims thinking, oh yeah, even the people that are in country, even perpetrators who are in country, because the AG said they are going to set up a special prosecution unit, right? That is going to take time to set up. It's going to take time. I know the court system. I'm not a lawyer, but some of us have cases 10 years pending in courts up to now. I mean, I'm sorry, Chief Justice and his team, but that is the situation. The court system in this country is terrible. You know, I think it's only economic crimes and all these cases that they treat in a rush. But every other case takes 2 to 3 years, 4 years. So it's important that people know the process, how it's going to take. Even perpetrators who are in country, you might be walking and seeing them in the streets, and you are saying, oh, but TRRC ko inyante kitindi la bari betama kanne. So I think it's important we simplify this. Like setting up a unit like that, how long would it take? And how frustrated do you think it might be for the victims, knowing that, oh, this is out, but we are still not yet there to see that part, the prosecution part?
I would just like to add in before they come in with their legal terms, just to continue from where Fatou stopped. She definitely highlighted a very good and important point, which is the media, because I think the media is the platform where information is really, taken out and then shared to the general public. So I think the media should definitely, if they have not started, should start to sensitize people, to educate the people about these important things. Because even if we go back to the legal people, they'll still be using their legal terms, and the layman would still not be understanding. They'll still have the perception that this is going to start tomorrow. And also another important point is, I think people need to understand that we have to start somewhere. Jame is the biggest fish. So they cannot start with Jame, the junglers. So I heard the minister talking about how the people who have been adversely mentioned would be either retired, sacked, or whatever would happen then. And I think that's a great point to start with. That doesn't really require setting up or the special units. It doesn't really require a lot of work to my belief.
As well.
It's implementing,
Yes. And I think that is a point where they can start from, and then people would now see and understand that, okay, this is a process. It's one step at a time. They have started from here. Because starting with Jame means we would really most likely never start. Or we would start in the next God knows when, because all these units have to be set up. So definitely the education, using the media as a tool, starting with what is recommended in terms of people that you see every day. You just need to go to PMO or Secretary General and say, these are the people. There you go. So at least, and then another important thing, this I am referring to the justice people, they should always keep people informed.
Absolutely.
Communication is very key in this. People need to know at every point in time where they are. That way, anxiety levels will not be very high. That way, yakar will do tasks, because people will still say, oh no, they'll get there. They've already done this. They're doing this. They're working on that. That way, definitely, I think everybody would be informed. And one final important thing is, I'm not sure if I missed it, but I think yesterday there was not a sign language interpreter. I'm talking about this because I used to be a trainee sign language interpreter, and I know how important it is when the hard of hearing are included in our discussions. Hard of hearing are especially in national issues. And I think yesterday that was missing, and I think moving forward they should definitely consider it.
That was an oversight.
That was an oversight. Throughout the TRRC.
I almost text Lamin and said, Lamin, would you just rush to the place and just do it?
And throughout TRRC, that was part of the program.
They should definitely
that
be
is
very mindful.
It's key. Now the process, like the setting up of the special prosecution and all, what does that entail? How long are we talking about here? I mean, people are eager. People want to see the process start. Do you think that's going to be a long timeline, or is it something that can be done like quickly?
Well, it's going to take time. Yes, because if you read the report, you would see that a legislative framework has to be set up. We have no torture laws in our country. So obviously that has to go to the National Assembly. And they did say that, it's in the white paper, that they are going to trigger that legislative process. So if it is not triggered already, that is, if the Attorney General's chambers, the Ministry of Justice was not doing that alongside when the TRRC was going on, obviously it means you have to start now. Right. The legislative process will take at the minimum maybe 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, to set it up. It would take that. The unit itself is not set up yet. It would be a combination of domestic and international. You'll have consultants coming from outside. So if you are going to try Jammeh outside the country, you'll have to also hire people, see how that judicial framework is going to be set up. So it's not a simple thing, like she said, as Baldeh said. I think communication is very important. The implementation process will take time. But of course, the rule of law is about taking time. It's not about rushing and doing things. In the Gambia here, we like to rush.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is a problem. You can get it wrong. But of course, delays, if the delay is too long, maybe that is problematic. But otherwise, delay is part of the rule of law. It is about the civilized process of setting up institutions and using those institutions then to advance the governance agenda of the country. So we should have all these things in place, to be honest. But because they are not in place, they have to be set up. Yeah. And that setting up will take time, like she said. This is not going to be, even if Jammeh is captured today, you can try him immediately. Yes, you still have to think about all the logistical concerns. Yeah. He would not be tried here on current realities.
I think, I totally agree with you and your point, I appreciate. But if you look at the recommendations, there are things that, as Oli said, that can be done immediately. Yes. And this will restore victims' confidence in the system. Yeah. Because if we're thinking prosecution is going to take another maybe 10, it could take 10 years. We've seen in other countries it's taking 20 years plus. Yeah. But there are things that can be done immediately, like for the people that have been recommended to be dismissed from work. This could happen on Monday. Yes. Like they don't need stuff. There are other parts of these recommendations that can be implemented immediately, maybe some that can be implemented in a month, but the process must continue. What we cannot accept is a process that that is very often the case in the Gambia. I know the delay and stuff, but also we have a habit of having documents and they're just there. And what we really want to avoid from this is that we have the white paper, we have the TRRC recommendations, we need to accelerate the process. We cannot sit and say, because prosecutions may take 10 years, we have to wait. Some of the things that can be done now, we want to see the government starting that. We want to see the government starting a process. We are hoping to see a roadmap. What does the government plan to do? A lot of these things we've heard and they are on paper. We want to see a plan of action. What are we going to do? What's the plan, the medium plan, the short and the long-term plans? We want to see that. And I believe that will help a lot in victims' confidence in the process.
Yeah. I think that definitely is what I was not expecting, something long. If I'm thinking next year we should be starting prosecution or something. So if this is what it should take, I think is the role of MOJ and whoever is responsible to start talking to people, because everybody is expecting that this is going to be like something very quick, and I think it's important. But I think that, like she said, there are things that can be done like tomorrow. Like the minister said, they're going to let off some of these people who are accused. They're going to let them stay home administratively until pending investigation. So those things are things that can be done immediately, and those would really help restore victim confidence.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to the point on the prosecution aspect of it, especially with regards to Yahya Jammeh, because like they said, a lot of people are expecting, if you talk to, especially the media now also translating or interpreting news in our local languages, and when they say TRRC ko Yahya Jammeh nyanta kitindilale and mansakunda sondalale, so a lot of people will be thinking like, okay, this is coming probably Monday, or it's coming next month. Okay? not knowing that there are a lot of issues, because people must also take time to read the recommendations of the white paper rather. People must take time to read the white paper, because if you look at the acceptance of the recommendations, at some point, you know, there are buts there to say this is depending on the circumstance or this particular situation or so on and so forth. So, I mean, those are things that we need to put into consideration. And like you said, the aspect of torture, especially, I think after 1994 coup, the ex-ministers that were tortured, including OJ and Kerr, I mean, if you look at that, we don't have any legislation right now that deals with torture. But as far as I know, if I'm not wrong, we have the torture bill at the National Assembly, but it's yet to...
And the International Crimes Bill.
Exactly. So what is going to happen is that we might not be able to rely on our domestic laws to prosecute these people for torture, which will fall under crimes against humanity. But then we can rely on international law, for instance, to do that. Even in the case of Jammeh, what is going to happen is that we don't have an extradition treaty with Equatorial Guinea, as far as I know. And Equatorial Guinea, like you said, is not a state party to the Rome Statute. But what we do know is that the principle of universal jurisdiction can be invoked, just like it is invoked in the case of Usman Sonko, who is in pre-detention trial, and also what is the name of the man in Germany? By law, also going to trial in Germany. So the principle of universal jurisdiction can always be explored, can always be invoked to make sure that these people are held accountable. But we can't do that just right now. It must take a process. I mean, even the special courts thing that we are talking about, if you look at his Habre, it's like 25 years, you know, before he could be held accountable. Charles Taylor, the war in Sierra Leone ended since 2002. It's also of recent, not long ago, a few years ago, that Charles Taylor was tried through the special court of Sierra Leone. So Jammeh's case will also take time. And if you look at also the killing of Koro Cisse, I think in the white paper specifically, the government is the government said it to say that although Yankuba Toure is this recommendation is partly implemented because Yankuba Toure is already convicted in the case murder of Koro Cisse, but you have orders that are outside the jurisdiction of the Gambia, and what they can do is to collaborate with those countries to see if they can extradite them, because extradition also it's not that you must have a treaty for them to, they can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not that you must have a treaty before the country can. For instance, Equatorial Guinea, as of its own volition today, can say, well, we are handing over Yahya Jammeh to you to be tried, even though there is no extradition treaty between the Gambia and Equatorial Guinea. But then, like you said, we must also look at the sensitive nature of these things. Even Sierra Leone, the reason why Charles Taylor had to be tried in the Hague, not by the ICC, but the premises of the ICC, is because of security reasons. They have to look at those things because, one, the victims have to be, the witnesses that might appear need their security. They need to be protected, and the government has to look at this. But not only that, sometimes we look at the judicial framework, whether this person will even be able to have free trial in where he's going to be tried. For instance, if we bring Jammeh here, because he's innocent until proven guilty. So will he be able to have that free trial in the Gambia? Is the judicial system ready to try Jammeh in this country?
Really emotional about that.
Exactly.
A lot of the judges might be, yes.
People must also put aside emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole thing, because it's a due process that we followed to set up the TRRC. And for me, the most important thing in the Truth Commission, the reason why I think I'm very glad that the government decided to come up with such a white paper is that if you look at the TRRC Act, for instance, I think Section 13, Section A, paragraph 1, 2, 3 deals with victims' impunity, especially paragraph 3 talking about addressing the issue of impunity. And the most important thing for me here, prosecution is important because it is about putting an end to impunity. It is also about addressing the needs of the victims as outlined in the Act. But for me, it is also about the legal and institutional reforms. And I think a lot of people forget about this. Most people focus on prosecution, reparation, the money that is coming. Yeah. It's not about that. It's also about, because the never again slogan that we're all talking about cannot happen if the reforms, the institutional legal reforms that are supposed to be done are not done, because it is to avoid a replica of such right violations. So in order to prevent such right violations being repeated in the Gambia, we must seriously embark on those reforms. And this is a political will on the side of the government. I keep on saying this, and people think that it's just too much. But this government has failed in this, and it must go back to the drawing board to make sure that the next 5 years that is coming, as we go into elections in 2026, we will not be holding Adama Barrow to say, you have not implemented this, you have not done this reform, you have not done this reform. The security sector reform must start moving. We must have the national security bill in place. We must have the torture bill and all those important legal reforms that are needed in the country. We should have them, but also institutional reforms, especially individuals that are manning these positions. And I want to come up with a question regarding that at that point. In the case of, because it's raised a lot of controversy, a lot of people are saying that 2 people are being spared here. Osman Sow, the DG of SIS, because the minister explained that the issue of tampering with evidence, it's out of the mandate of the TRRC, because the TRRC mandate covers from July 22nd, 1994 up to January 2017, and the act of the issue of tampering with evidence by Sow took place in May 2017. So they are saying it's out of the mandate of the TRRC. As a result, they cannot, implement that recommendation. They cannot accept that recommendation. And I think also in the case of former Minister
Yankuba Sonko,
I think they're talking about setting up an investigation, whatever. Exactly. So I'm not sure what, from a legal point of view, both of you, I don't know. In the case of Sow specifically, is the government right to say it is out of the mandate of the TRRC as a result that recommendation cannot be accepted legally?
Abdoulie.
Thank you. Well, for me personally, I thought that was going to be the most challenging one for government, Usman Sow. And I did not believe that government had the will to accept that sort of recommendation. And I believe that they'll find a way of making sure that he evades accountability. And I think that, okay, the mandate of the TRRC, legally speaking, it's limited to July 1994 to January 2017. But what happened is, I think when TRRC got hint, first of all, I think they communicated that the NIA must be preserved because it was a live crime scene. The NIA was the face of Jammeh's brutality. So I think there was communication that preserve this place is of good interest to the TRRC. So I think when what started coming around that things are happening, another communication was made. Legally, whether strictly speaking, if Usman Sow were to go to the Court of Appeal to challenge that recommendation, he may succeed.
Yeah.
Because if you strictly apply the law, you can say the TRRC went beyond the expressed limitations of its powers. But that is if you strictly apply the law. What I had expected was for government to say, we have, in terms of the recommendation for removal from office or ban from office, we have rejected that because that falls outside the mandate of the TRRC. However, in pursuit of justice for victims and to show genuine political commitment that government is serious about implementing the TRRC recommendations, that he will still be sanctioned. Nothing prevents the government from doing that. More so, in 2000, Mamoudou Dumosao was charged with treason, and several other individuals he was co-accused. Amongst them, there is one, I can't remember, he now lives in the US. He testified before the TRRC by video link, one Mr. Barrow. Mr. Barrow was arrested from his house, taken to the NIA, where he alleged he was tortured. Amongst the people who were present when he was tortured is Usman Sow. Although Usman Sow didn't physically participate in hitting him, but he was there. And the TRRC made a finding in relation to this. So even if we disregard the tampering, and the tampering of the evidence is significant.
It's significant.
Because the NIA embodied the brutality. Because this was one institution used by Yahya Jammeh to put fear in the minds of Gambians. Because you hear the NIA and you hear Bamba Dinka, people feared. So therefore, for the person responsible for that agency to begin to damage and destroy evidence to minimize the culpability of that agency.
Even when he was told.
Even when he was told. So for the government, even if TRRC had not made any recommendation in relation to this, what the minister was saying yesterday, he spoke with purpose, that they are serious about restoring dignity and telling us that they are serious about this stuff. If that is the case, okay, they put their money where their mouth is, I think Usman Sow ought to be sanctioned. Not even in relation, this is a very serious matter, but even if we say granted technically, legally, there may be a bit of room to maneuver. And I think it's a funny issue. But let's go back to the torture of Mr. Barrow, where he was present. And at the time he was in a junior officer, I think he was a middle level. And now TRC made a finding. And all those people who were present at that torture scene, findings were made against them. Not recommendations in terms of Usman Sow, but findings were made. So if the state is serious, and this person who is responsible for the agency that was the most notorious in carrying out human rights violations and abuses. So if you want to tell me now, this is not much different to Alaji Sise, the chief of protocol in the Janneh Commission, where you find a very glorified way of saying that he's a messenger and therefore you whatever. So Usman Sow, I think government need to. But in relation to Usman Sonko, Yankuba Sonko, former interior minister, I have heard that he was not in the country at the time that these things happened. If I don't know whether these things were revealed to the TRRC, but if he's able to produce compelling and credible evidence that he wasn't here and therefore he's able to establish his innocence, then because our agenda here and our purpose here is for justice, not for people to be recommended who haven't done anything, if that were the case. However, he appeared before TRRC. If he were in possession of this evidence, I don't know whether he provided this to the TRRC, but that one perhaps an investigation. But for Usman Sow, regardless of the legal issue, if government is serious, I think for what he did, even if the TRRC didn't even say anything, government can take its own position to make sure there is form of accountability.
So let me go, Darboe. Okay, for me this is more of a moral issue here. Because I heard one of the ministers say, when we were talking, he was asked a question about Yankuba Sonko. He said, in fact, maybe that's why he's not in cabinet, because president doesn't want to be distracted. Because the moral thing to do is, people, in fact, that's why people like Mamburi Njai are not in cabinet. Anytime you bring issues like that, they will say, oh, Mamburi Bela cabinet totally. So, that is one of the reasons why Yankuba Sonko is not in cabinet, because they know that this report is there and it might just affect him, and they know they're going to make decisions about him. He cannot be in that cabinet when those decisions are made. Now, this guy, Usman Sow, is the Director General of the National Intelligence Office. He has issues, even though, yes, the government is saying, yes, even though if he did it, but it was the timeline. That's what they're arguing. They're not arguing about him doing it or not doing it. Now, if you know that this guy has done something like this, wouldn't it be morally right to even say, yes, maybe he should not be prosecuted. The ban, 5 years ban might be heavy, but at least remove him from that position to at least give courage to people, the victims, because evidences were destroyed at the NIA, and those evidences is what is going to bring justice to these victims. That is a serious case. It's not a violation
of law for Barrow to say, Usman, so you are fired.
I moved you. I've just moved you from NIA. I'll take you to another position. So that's my argument here. I know you are a legal person. You will be, you would want to limit to legal, but I think also Gambia, everybody is indirectly a victim. And I think that's why people are very much passionate about this particular issue. What's your take on the Usman Sow issue?
Well, the never again mantra is about governance. At the end of the day, it is not in our nature to hold government accountable. We are not used to that, but that is where we should start. Yes, like as I said, this is all about what kind of government do you have. Yes. If you have a government that does anything it wants to do and get away with it, even under the mildest precedent, atrocities approximating what happened under Jammeh will happen. So governance is key here. Yes. Government officers must not be protected when they hide information, and it is routine in this country. Yeah. People lose their homes, you sit on the evidence, and it doesn't come out. Nobody can do anything about it. You can go all the way to the presidency. If the president is not interested, that evidence will never come out. What kind of message does that send? Yes. So we have the accountable.
For me, I think civil society, I mean victims specifically can push this agenda to put pressure on the government to remove this man. I mean, because at the end of the day, it might affect justice delivery. Imagine somebody being taken to court to be prosecuted based on these recommendations, and evidence are nowhere to be found because this man has tampered with them. And the government is not even denying that it happened. They are telling us that indirectly, yes, it happened, but it happened outside the mandate of the TRRC.
Now, this is not even in relation to Usman Sonko. It's very routine. I'm talking about accountability. I'm talking about governance as a general proposition for this country to move forward. Unless it's like leadership. You know, what happened here from 1994 to 2017 was because we had no institutions to challenge the government of the day. None, no institutions at all. Yes. So that kind of impunity cannot do anything but take the country backwards. In fact, there was a shadow state in this country. Yes. You have ministers who were involved in criminality. There are ministers who didn't know. Oh, they had like you and I, but they didn't participate in that criminality. But they were nevertheless in government. If you are fired as a minister, why would you run to Senegal and leave the country? If you believe you were serving an accountable, civilized, dignified government, if you are fired, just go home. You have nothing to fear. So coming back to the issue of Usman Sonko, clearly there is a serious moral issue there. Yeah. You and I and counsel here can understand, you know, the legal justifications, but people will not be able to accept. Ordinary people cannot accept that this can happen and that person is serving in such a sensitive position. What is power? You know, sometimes it works in mysterious ways. There are relationships that we are not aware of that can affect everything that happens in government. Yes. So unless there is accountability, those relationships will take precedence over the law. They will take precedence over morality. In other words, impunity will continue.
I just have a question that I want to ask you guys pertaining to the Usman Sonko issue. Yes, definitely for him to rush and paint the whole place, I think definitely that's a criminal act. But now my question is, since the government has made it very clear that the TRC Act, what they were mandated to investigate and make recommendations was from 94 to January 2017, we give them that. I think as Mr. Fatou has said, they're in the legal framework, right, legal framework. So now my question is, because these cases that should be prosecuted is definitely going to court. Now, in an instance that we go to court, and they need, somebody said I was tortured in Babandinka. So of course they would have to go to Babandinka to try to see and get the evidences. So if they get there and there's no evidence, at that point in time, can Sonko be held accountable? Would the court don't have the powers to say, okay, this place had the evidence, but definitely somebody had tampered with the evidence. Now at this point, who tampered with the evidence? Would that person not be held accountable or be called for to answer? So even if the TRC recommendations are rejected by government, fair enough. But would the courts not be in a position to say who tampered with this evidence? We need you to bring them, and for that reason, would SO not be in?
No, we don't even have to wait.
Yeah, I agree. But then what I'm trying to say is, exactly, they should at any point in time. Yes.
There's already even precedent.
Yes.
You remember when Alaji Kanye testified?
Exactly.
And he said Yankuba Ture called him and told him that when these people call you, that means TRRC, don't tell them anything.
Yes. And
Fatuma Jampo were charged
immediately
for basically interfering with the work of the TRRC. So again, I think the reason why probably SO wasn't prosecuted at the time is because who he is. But even right now, there's nothing that prevents the Attorney General or the police from prosecuting him, because what he did was criminal.
But again, the courts can actually demand for him, because that's again the government saying. But once we get to the courts, once we get to the trials, once we get to the prosecution, and they need this evidence, would SO not be in trouble?
The judiciary is a referee. It does not get involved in the disputes between the state, that is the executive arm of government, and private individuals, except in its judging capacity. So if you want to do anything to SO, you have to take it back to Dawda Jallow, Attorney General, to the President, to the Director of Public Prosecutions. We don't have any right now, but the Attorney General's chambers is there. So no, the courts cannot demand SO unless there is a substantive charge against him, preferred by the state. So the courts will not do that.
But can a private citizen sue him for, like, the people whose evidences have been destroyed? Do they have that? Can they sue him for that?
Well, I don't know what council's position is, but I don't even understand the fixation on torture. I don't understand that. You know, these are assaults. They happen. Yeah. If you cannot prosecute, because we don't have a torture statute, why would you not prosecute them for something else? The important thing is for them to be punished, to be held accountable. Yes. Even this thing about crimes against humanity. Unfortunately, we don't have any crime against humanity in the Gambia. That is an international crime. It has not been domesticated in this country. And the threshold needed to charge somebody with a crime against humanity is very, very high. You know, in fact, crimes against humanity, you can say, take place in the context of major domestic unrest, civil war, if you like, or war against another country. These are just ordinary crimes that, given international definitions, because of the context, that is, you have to kill 1,000 people. They don't put any figure on it, but it has to be too high for you to meet that threshold. Yes. I read the TRRC when they were saying they were recommending Sabali for amnesty. It says, because the Rome Statute, that is the statute governing the ICC, was not set up at the time. It was not in effect. Really, do you need that? What justification was that?
That was what I was going to come to, the Sana Sabali issue.
Yes.
Government rejected the TRRC recommendation. Yeah. And I saw the TRRC lead counsel put a statement out yesterday. And to quote him, I think he said, the government, in respect to Sana Sabali, the government erred because legally he thinks they erred, right? And I saw somewhere somebody talking about this Rome Statute being, I don't know the limitation, I don't know all these things, how they frame it. But what is your take on the Sana Sabali issue? Because the same TRRC said people that bear the highest cost of, I don't know, what's the word they said? Crime. Yes, should not be qualified for amnesty. Why are they recommending amnesty for Sana Sabali?
But at the same time, it says that those who show remorse and
do this, do that, and he did all of that.
If you show remorse, yes, but it also said if
is that not contradictory then?
It's contradictory.
No, it's not contradictory. Okay. No, you cannot be eligible for amnesty if your crimes acts that form part of
the greatest
continuous crimes against humanity. That is what he said. So the issue of Sana Sabally was, does his crimes fall under crimes against humanity? The Rome Statute came into, I think it was signed in 1998-99, came into force in 2002. And Sana Sabally's crimes or alleged crimes were in 1994. But the Rome Statute, so far as crimes against humanity, is a widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population. That is the definition by the Rome Statute. And therefore, when you look at Sana Sabally, it wasn't against a civilian population. It wasn't systematic. In fact, it was in 1994, 5 years before this instrument was even signed, almost 8 years before it even came into force. So that is the legal position. So for Sana Sabally, for me to say that what Sana Sabally did form acts that are part of crimes against humanity, I think would be a really significant stretch. Even though one can also make this argument, the issue of customary international law, because doesn't mean international law only came into effect when the Rome Statute, the Nuremberg trial, established this principle as well. But even in our own context as well, the Yankubature judgment, the Honorable Chief Justice said, customary international law is part of the common law, and therefore, since we have a common law system, I mean, some of these things where universally they are wrong, whether they are domesticated or not, it is deemed that they form part of our law. So, but for Sana Sabally, so strictly speaking, for me, he can be charged with murder if they wish. But crimes against humanity, my argument is his crimes do not fall under crimes against humanity because of it doesn't satisfy the requirements established in the Rome Statute. That is one. But for Sana Sabally as well, the issue of the amnesty, whether it's right or correct, but for the TRRC, I believe they would say he came and he made full disclosure and
said that he was a victim.
No, but can I also just throw into that?
Yeah.
I think that, like, talking to victims, especially direct victims of Sana Sabally, one of the things that was really upsetting when they heard about amnesty is that Sana wasn't actually remorseful in his testimony. Sana talked about himself. In fact, he said that if that was to happen again, he would still repeat those acts. So that wasn't showing remorse. For Sana Sabally to talk about cutting those people's head, their enemies, and they would cut, when you find an enemy, you cut their head like a snake, that is not exactly showing remorse. And when we talk about amnesty, we were looking at, the TRRC was meant to look at victims perpetrators who've testified and showed remorse. For me and for victims, we didn't see remorse from Sana Sabally. In fact, my whole interpretation of Sana Sabally is the fact that Sana Sabally, I feel, played the Gambian population. Sana Sabally came and testified first as a perpetrator, and on the second day he came as a victim, but also as a victim of sexual violence. And for some reason, the Gambian society couldn't put their head around a man being castrated. And I think Sana received a lot of sympathy because he's a man that experienced sexual violence. Meanwhile, the women who testified as SGBV victims, what happened to them? They didn't receive even quarter of that sympathy, even though these women, not that it would have given any excuse to experience sexual violence, even though they were not perpetrators, they were innocent women, they were still raped. But when these women testified, we also, what happened to them? So for me, that's my interpretation for Sana. All the empathy he received is not because he showed remorse, it's because he was a man who experienced sexual violence. And I really hope that the Gambian population had that empathy for women when they experience sexual violence.
And I agree with Counsel. Obviously, Sana cannot be tried for crimes against humanity. But nobody can actually be tried for crimes against humanity as far as this TRRC is concerned. So the fundamental question is, why do we even have it in the TRRC Act when we know that the definition, the threshold, yes, even Jame. I wrote about that in 2012. that Jammeh, with all that he did, because of the threshold around crimes against humanity, it would be virtually impossible to get him at the ICC. I wrote that article in reaction to an interview that Fatou Bensouda gave to
BBC
Al Jazeera. No, this one was Al Jazeera
it's
in
the same
2012. She was asked if Jammeh was a dictator. She looked at the interview and said nothing. Yeah. So she pressed the point. Why did you serve somebody like him? She said Jammeh never interfered with her job. Yes. But of course, I disagree with that, given my own experience with her as Attorney General. But I agree. I did say that, yes, that is what we wanted. A lot of us want to see Jammeh at the ICC. But really, the statute, the threshold is too high. The systematic attack, the widespread nature, you know. This, of course, a lot of things happen in the country, but it was not systematic. Yes.
But what do you say to
directed against a civilian population? That was
difficult. What do you say to her? Because I think she said at some point that the crimes, the alleged crimes that happen in the Gambia indeed have met the threshold. And even the current chief prosecutor, I think Emir Khan, did say the same, that the ICC can indeed intervene in the case of the Gambia.
That was recently. She said that.
But during that interview, she did talk about threshold.
I agree with Council in relation to, these are international crimes, especially crimes against, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and the other one. These are the big four. And crimes against humanity is actually the, because war crimes can be sorted, but crimes against humanity is against civilians. So the threshold is high. But you'll forgive me, Council, but on this point I think we always agree for the most part. But this one I would differ slightly. So I'll offer a dissenting opinion. but no, I think regardless of the threshold, I believe for Jammeh, and I think probably he's the only one, maybe, I don't know, maybe he's the only one under the regime who may have satisfied this threshold. But I think for Jammeh, I think his crimes have hit the threshold for crimes against humanity. One, November 11th, Koro Sise, April 10th and 11th, those do not fall and therefore would not. But even afterwards, that wouldn't fall under the, but even those can be used in terms of establishing the mindset of Jammeh, the systematic nature. Because what happened is, November 11th, you want to send a message that anybody who wants to challenge your authority would pay the ultimate price. That's why he told Sana Sabandi when they were going to attack that, do not spare any prisoners, kill all the ringleaders. He did that. Then shortly after that, Koro Sise as well, April 10th and 11th as well, defenseless students. But because you want to oppress and suppress and intimidate the population, that any form of dissent has to be crossed. So subsequently, what Jammeh did, and I think when you use the NIA, how the NIA was used was not in isolation, was systematic. Because what happened is the NIA worked with the junglers, with the prisons, and with the state guards. So anybody who was picked up, taken to the prisons, the junglers will come and pick you up at 1 or 2 a.m. And that time, they don't even allow any visitors, never mind taking prisoners out. But the junglers enjoyed that privilege and impunity. So the junglers will go to the prisons at 2, 3 a.m., pick you up, chain you, beat you up on the way, take you to the NIA, and torture you. While they were doing that, who were present? NIA officials. While they were also who were present, some top army chiefs were also present. But Jammeh also made sure his own people from the state guards were also present. So sometimes the solo Bojans and they didn't actually do anything, but they were simply there just to make sure that the NIA and the army generals knew the significance of their presence, that this is actually sanctioned by them, and that's why we're here to witness what you're doing so that we can report back. So if you look at the junglers as well, what was the motive? The junglers operated as an independent outfit within the army that reported directly to him. So what the junglers did was not to go and when you were visited by the junglers, you knew that for the most part you will meet death. So if you look at how the junglers, the attempted murder of Usman Silla, the murder of Deda Hydra, and several other individuals. So how the NIA, the army, and all these institutions work. The attack on political opponents. So this was a system that was in place.
Ghanaians.
Pursuant to a policy that he had, that I am going to suppress and intimidate. So therefore it was widespread. It happened over a long period of time. And the reason why we say the threshold has been met, because sometimes we look at the numbers, you know, even though here it's about between 210 to 250, but in Kenya, during the violence in Kenya, post-election violence 2007-8, about a similar number were killed. But that met the threshold for it to go to the ICC. William Ruto, and even the president himself. But in Kenya, look at the Kenyan population. The population of Nairobi alone is more than the Gambia. So if 100 or 200 people were killed in Kenya, we were never here. So that means in terms of numbers we have, but also this also corresponds with the systematic nature of everything.
Institutionalization.
And therefore, that doesn't mean that obviously it'll be, but I believe that Jammeh's crimes, but I think it's only him, maybe other people. But I think if you look at from day one, then you can now then begin to use November 11, Korosise, April 10th and 11th, and all the others to show that this was a mindset pursuant to a policy that they right from day one, and therefore that may allow you to establish that the widespread and the systematic nature of it had made it reach the crimes against humanity threshold.
I think the ICC did say that. The chief prosecutor did say that.
After Jammeh left?
When the TRC left.
Karim
Khan.
But that's just an opinion. You still have to go to the patrol chamber to establish those things. Look, we accept what happened here was really ruthless. But we are talking about law here. We are talking about the threshold that was set up. These international tribunals were not set up to try murders like these. I don't think we should waste our time in crimes against humanity and other things. All of these people can be prosecuted under our domestic law as we have it today. Yes. Why bring international law?
That's what I was even going to say now. Why the setup of the new
special?
Can't we use our existing courts?
But sometimes what we are saying, Fatou, you remember we're talking about the sensitive nature of, for instance, trying Jammeh in this country. So if it is not possible here, probably, okay, it might take maybe 15 years, 20 years before we can get Jammeh here to be tried. So why can't we pursue in international avenues to try him? That is why
looking at something, because Jammeh right now, he's in Equatorial Guinea. And I don't think Equatorial Guinea is a very flexible country for us to actually get Jammeh. So I think...
why are we so strict about that?
I'm just saying, and for me, my belief is, honestly, Jammeh is the highest level. We just need to start from the bottom and then go up. But then just to...
The low-hanging fruits.
Yes. Exactly. You don't even need to throw a stone. You just pluck it out. But I want to really agree with Fatou when it comes to Sana Sabali, because with Sana, I think he really played, he did an emotional blackmail to people. And I remember even lead counsel at some point, he cried, or he almost cried. But then, and that was across the board, because I remember when Sana was testifying, it seems like there was no work. I mean, everybody locked off from what you were doing, and everybody was watching. And after that, the opinions were, hey, and then I really don't think he showed any remorse, because he believed that what he did was right. That's why he did say, if I have to do it again, I will. And for him, how I think he's seeing is these people wanted to take position, so we have to eliminate them. But somebody who's already been arrested really cannot do much. But then it comes back to the point that they were trying to make a point. They were trying to send a message to the rest and say, do not even try this, because if you try this, this is exactly what is going to happen. But then now we come to the case of Aja Aissatou Njie Saidi. That is another emotional one. And I think from just talking to a lot of people across, people are taking this white paper with a lot of emotions. People are taking the white paper with a lot of personal anger to some, and for some family relations. So it's I think government's position, honestly, with me, I'm happy about it. It's very clear. But if you go across just talking to different people have different opinions. Someone said to me today, but then the law to me is not about Nenko Bai, it's not about common sense, it's not about what I think it's what's written in black and white. Fine, it may have a lot of definitions, it may have a lot of interpretations depending on the English language. As they say, a comma makes a big difference in a sentence. But with Aissatou Njie Saidi, with April 10 and 11, for me, I don't think she showed any remorse, and I think she was being very defensive when she came to testify. I could have seen her being given amnesty, for example, if she did admit and say, you know what, I definitely made a mistake. I had orders from Jammeh, but I should have not done this. This is something that I've been thinking of for the longest time. This is wrong. But for her to kind of try to say, I don't know, I don't, you know, I'm not aware, that just triggers a lot of emotions. But then to everybody, I think the white paper should definitely be treated we should remove our emotions and then go by what the law says. And if the law holds her accountable, then I guess she should be held accountable. But I would want to know especially you, Fatou, what's your take on her, recommendations for Aissatou Njie Saidi?
Well, she was in a position of power. So she, for me, I don't have a problem with the recommendation. When you are in a position of power, it's what Mr. Darboe was saying. You have responsibilities. You had a choice of saying no. There was an option of saying no. I don't want to be part of this. Some people did it. For the people who stayed and condoned Jammeh's violence, whether directly or indirectly, they should be held accountable.
Especially for 20 years.
Yes. And as you indicated, she showed no remorse. She took no responsibility of her actions. So and if we're talking about never again, we need to set examples. And that is what we need to do with this report, with this white paper. We must set examples. I have worked with some of the victims who were victims of April 10 and 11, especially the women. As Council Fatou knows, a lot of the stories of women didn't really come out in the TRRC because of the same fear that if I came out and talk as a victim, and I've met some victims of April 10 and 11 who were very young at the time, underage girls who were raped, so many things, whose lives have been destroyed. And the violations affected women and men differently. When we spoke to families, for instance, in cases where a husband murdered was disappeared, we saw that in those families, how the woman had to take over the responsibility, whereas, for instance, in most of these cases, especially in the rural areas, women had to give up their going to school. And in instances where that happened, we saw also that female, like the daughters, always were taken out of school to give their brothers opportunity to go. So you see how the violence trickled down. Or the fact that some of those girls ended up being married at an early age. Again, those are these underlying issues that may not come out in prosecutions and stuff, but this is how violations affected women differently. And also, I just want to stress on the issues of, you were talking about systematic abuse. One of the things that was really highlighted was sexual violence, how Jammeh used sexual violence as a form of torture to teach lessons. If he had someone who was brought in as a witness to confess to a crime, if you didn't confess to a crime, he would bring female members. Sana Sabali testified about that. He would bring in female members who are close to you, and they would be raped in front of you. And in most of those cases, those people would have to confess to those crimes. So women bodies were used as a battlefield during Jammeh, and I think that is something that didn't come out very strongly in the TRRC. But I appreciated yesterday in his opening remarks, the Honorable Minister specifically talked about sexual violence. So for me, if the TRRC has done anything, is the fact that it opened up this conversation, this uncomfortable conversation on how prevalent rape and the acceptance of sexual violence is within our society that we didn't talk about. The TRRC broke that silence, and I hope we use this momentum to continue that and to make changes.
It's not only Jammeh when it comes to sexual violence. I think Usman Sonko is also recommended for prosecution for the rape of Binta Jabang, I think. She's also just on the case of Aissatou Njie when it comes to the issue of amnesty. I think amnesty is also for people that have shown remorse, that have accepted responsibility, and throughout her testimony she did not accept responsibility. So why will you apply for amnesty when in the first place you have not accepted responsibility for the alleged crimes that you must have committed? And I think it's not also this is a woman who was supposed to be the mother of the nation, who was supposed to look after every child in this country, especially innocent school children that were out in the street, were murdered, massacred. And all that you had to do, honorably, like you said, you could have resigned from your position when that happened. You were second in command. In fact, you were first in command in the country because Jammeh was out of the country at the time. So, in fact, at some point when I saw that that recommendation, acceptance on the white paper, I was like, how will, I don't know, maybe legally they will look for a way of getting Jammeh, but how will Jammeh be held responsible for that? Was it that he was giving orders to Aissatou Njie for them to be executed, or Aissatou was the one giving orders also?
No, definitely, I think Jammeh was the one giving orders. We all know that Aissatou would not give orders.
That was my thinking.
But I think the statement, the statement she made on TV, just saying the shooting, for me, I still would remember that. I mean, it's just stuck in my head. The shooting started from the demonstrators. That is something I still cannot get my head around. How can the kids start the shooting?
But we have that culture. During Jammeh's time, when these violations were happening, how many Gambians said, Lidu Gambia ninyo koneka di but ñu joge Liberia la. We denied it. We denied that this was happening. We denied it was possible for Gambians to do this. But we had in witness testimonies, I remember one of the victims that we worked with talked about how when her husband was murdered, she later on found out in the TRRC, in fact the people that came to console her, the soldiers, were the very people that had killed her husband. So imagine that. But I just wanted to follow up. When we talk about domestic prosecutions, of course I will not do justice if I don't bring this. Issues around sexual violence. We all know impunity around crimes on sexual violence is rampant in Gambia. So because of not just the problem with the judiciary, but also because of our society's norms, and when, but also I discovered, I hung around with a lot of lawyers, but I still can't get the word right, corroboration, where victims have to, victims of sexual violence in our law, how would that apply? Can you explain that to us properly, like in a lay person's language? Because for some of these victims, some of these women, when they were raped, and that is like they need to bring evidence. How are they supposed to bring evidence that they were being raped? At that point, women would tell you, madam, si hospital, even to report or to look for medication, because how the doctor that I'm going to see mungi connected, dinama report. So because it was systematic, women had nowhere to go. Women had nowhere to receive support, both medical and psychosocial, because of what happened to them. And they're living with that trauma. But how, if we're talking about prosecution, and again, we will expect these victims to come again and testify, to give evidence. How will that work in our system?
That's she used the word corroboration. That would be very difficult because unless it happened in a really sadistic context where you have several men there. But are they going to testify against each other?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe for the issues around sexual violence, we need to look at other options, because with the context, not just about that, but also for the things that these victims, the few victims who were brave enough to come out and share, we also what happened to them. Do we expect those people to go through that again within this context? So these are the uncomfortable conversations that we have.
That's why we are also, this is why these things are complicated, because even in relation to that, we'll have to get international experts, people who've worked in over tribunals, because this is a very specific issue, sexual and gender-based violence. And but the fortunate thing is, over time, the judicial way of looking at it has actually, there's been a significant progress because even at the Hague, in terms of Congo, some of the generals and the rebels using women. Yeah. So they came to a point when even rape was accepted as an instrument as a weapon of war. Yeah. So similar stuff, because in those things as well, it's unlikely that you will also get people who would, but maybe with international expertise support, we will. It's a funny. What I mean is difficult one, because for rape, it is a requirement that there must be corroboration, and that corroboration may mean several things. So one, you are the one alleging, so you're one. So the corroboration will now be medical report, or for example, the garment that you may have been wearing, or something like it. So maybe discharge on that garment will be corroboration, because you're saying this happened to me. Look at the thing, there is some blood on it, so that there was some form of activity.
But realistically, we know all these things are not available.
But what I'm saying as well is, over time, I think the courts are also beginning to understand that we have to, just like how even the issue of rape is now becoming very wide. So in relation to that, I think there is now this judicial thing of where even the issue of rape, the international thing, is especially when you look at it in a context where it is systematic. Because at the NIA here and some other places as well, so corroboration may, and even there is I was having a conversation with a judge, I think 2 years ago, in relation to corroboration, in relation to the same thing as well, because that person happened to come from law school, and we're discussing about corroboration, what it can actually mean and stuff like that. But I hope by the time these matters go to court, we'll have a system in place which is I wouldn't say sympathetic, but a system that is liberal in a way, to recognize the difficulty that women face as well, and rather than being 100% strict as in, but even at the ICC, I think they're beginning to widen it a little bit.
Thank you. So we are running out of time. I have two more points that I want us to. Now work is gone, so we are going to. So one thing, the never again mantra, I think might be very, we might have it if government is able to implement these two recommendations that I've seen they have put on the white paper, like security officers who have been recommended to be banned from the system, they have accepted. Because the reason why I bring especially the Gorgimbo case, this is somebody that everybody has accused even before going to TRRC about his conduct in society. He's the most feared human being in the country. And when everything was said about him, he was accused of issues, but he never even showed remorse. I remember after even going to the TRRC, he came out torturing this guy, that boy, and he was suspended. He came out again having issues with protesters. I specifically remember, because I was the one who interviewed that Darboe guy, when after the when we had a breakdown here, and my team went to the anti-crime and said, "Oh, we are from Kerr Fatou, Sungol Nathan, Kerr Fatou, bah na siya." We said, "Was more on the interview, the one that more daha." You know, those people, he didn't have remorse. He thought what was doing was right up to that day. Even though he was at the TRRC, even though he was suspended, he was moved to another region, he still believes that he's the right person to go after these people, these criminals. The way he was treating them is the same way he's treating them up to now. Now, getting him out of the system and other officers who have been doing the same thing would only teach these other people, because we have seen what happens during protests. You know, when things happen, they're just throwing gas at people. Look at the Sabali incident that happened in Brikama and other incidents that happened, the 3 years Jatna incident. They were still doing the same things they are doing. Now, if they know that you're going to be banned for 5 years or 10 years, maybe, just maybe, they will start acting like the profession dictates. So don't you think these are very welcoming acceptance? I never thought government will, to start with, I never thought government would accept the Gorgimbo recommendation, because everybody thought he was one of the most powerful. Even government officials will tell you, IGP, the former IGP told me, "Fatou, I wish you know what this guy does in the system. He's very good." They believe he was good. So the banning him, I mean, nobody wants anybody to lose their livelihood, but banning him to have a better system, what do you think that will do to our security system?
Well, it's a good start. But really, individuals operate within a system when it is rotten. So at the end of the day, unless the system itself is reformed, targeting individuals like Golden Book will do nothing. It deserves to be out, but obviously it will not change our realities. Our problem is governance. Yes. Unless you get governance right, is lawlessness within government, within the public sector, within those who are working for us will continue. It is not about arresting people, detaining them. Even today, the police officers are detaining people for nothing. Yes. It's just the way the system works. That's where we need to start. If an IGP believes that Kolgenburg was a fantastic officer, that tells you the challenges we have within that security sector. Yes.
I have a question for you, Mr. Fati. I'm not sure what is the recommendations for from the TRRC with regards to the legal system. I haven't really gone through that, but
it's something we need to look at too.
Because for me, I think you need to be charged with a crime, or a legal, like a lawyer or a judge or somebody needs to say this person has done that. And we have seen from testimonies during TRRC how some people did not really commit these crimes that they were accused of. But we had these legal people who actually drafted or recommended or said this person did that, and that led to everything that they have suffered. That led to their arrest. It led to them being taken to mile 2. It led to some of them being raped. It led to some of them going missing, and some of them actually even being murdered. So I'm not sure. As I said, I've been looking, because the paper just came out yesterday, and definitely I want to things that I have to talk about. I need to be sure of. So I haven't got to that bit yet. But I just wanted to know if there is any recommendations, or how would we change this narrative, because I think. Some of the crimes that have been committed, yes, these people committed crimes, but what they were charged were not the crimes that they have committed, or the magnitude of the charges that they were given, or the sentences they were given really does not correspond or collaborate with the crimes that they have committed. And this has led to a lot of people suffering. So I think we need to look at our justice system as well, look at our institutions of how these things can be avoided, so the never again really would mean something, because even we have the arch, we put everybody's name. That is great. That is something that for me is more of a history than anything else, because we can have our kids would say, why do we have all these names here? Then we can say, well, we had this and this happened, and these were the people that lost their lives, this and that. So it's great, and where the arch is positioned, where it's situated, I think it's really good, and that so that is great. But then just comes back to, if these institutions are not really reformed, or if these people are not really educated, or I think they're already educated in terms of academics, but they need another form of education, awareness, I would say. These things would happen again, and never again would really not mean anything.
I mean, the judiciary, but the judiciary, you have people, they stole a bottle of water, they are in mile 2 for 5 years, they have no access to the courts, because the judges, I'm sorry, because they are so powerful though. But the fact of the matter is, there should be reforms across, and that is, the judiciary is no exception. And I was telling Abdoulie, we need to have programs regarding what happens in our court system. To be honest, there are so many people lying in the mile 2 and in cells who are not connected to anybody. If I'm detained today, I'm sure everyone will start in Fature, but if you are just an ordinary person, nobody cares about what you have done, and then you are lying there, there's no court sittings, they will tell you, judge will drive over fuelo so to be a man, so judge is not there, but that person who has the right to fair hearing is sleeping in mile 2. And because they don't have access. So I think, in as much as we're talking about reforming all of the sector, the judiciary also needs to be reformed, because, to be honest, a lot of people, and that is human rights abuses as well, because if people's rights and privileges or rights are not, or respected, they are not having access to fair trial. That is also abuse of rights, right? And all of this, the judiciary, the media, the security, all of them need to be reformed. And for us to do that, it has to be like a systematic overhaul of our entire system. And I think this is why, sometimes nobody wants to talk about the judiciary because they're powerful. The judges are very powerful. But these things are very important to talk about.
Yeah, I think for me, it's actually, and I made this comment a couple of weeks ago when we had a consultation, it's about moving away from not just the institution. Violence doesn't occur in a vacuum. There were already existing stuff that made it possible for Jammeh to violate the rights of people for 22 years. The environment, there were already factors on the ground. If we want to really reform, we must start at the household level. It is within our system. We must start changing mentalities. We must instill principles, ethics within our society. I say one of the biggest problems of Gambian society is lack of principles and ethics. When people go into law, they're not going because of wanting, not everybody. Some many are not, or like when people go into, let me move the profession. When people go into becoming doctors, most of them, it's not because of that passion for change. It's because, if I am a doctor, I will earn a good salary, I will have the reputation. When people take on teaching roles, I have looked for jobs everywhere and I can't find a job. My only option now is to go to Gambia College and do that. For most people, that is the reality. If you talk to people that went to high schools, like in the 70s, 80s, they would tell you how different our education system was. What changed? How can we make sure that when people go into the profession, for instance, of teaching, they are going not just because that's the only job they could take, or that when we have police officers, they're not going into the security sector because that's the only thing that is available. We must have passion for the professions that we take. That way, when your actions would be guided by your principles and your ethics. And I think that is one thing that we lack. And to change that, we must go back to the grassroots, from the household level, at the school system, to change these mentalities. Because once those people go until they are older and in these positions, there you go.
What to be there?
Just one.
Just one thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing. I mean, in the recommendations of the TRRC, of course, I think the government also accepted that. A lot of people tend to forget about that. Has to do with the issue of ethnicity. And I think it's a recommendation for the government to come up with a law, a legislation that is going to criminalize hate speech or derogatory remarks made against certain tribes, because it's becoming a problem in the Gambia, and I think it's a threat to our social fabric as a people and as a nation. So that is why the TRRC came up with that. So when I saw that, I was so interested in it, and I looked at exactly what the government says about it in the white paper, and the government fully accepted to say they're going to come up with a legislation. So it's important for people to be aware of this, because people have been calling for there to be a legislation that would criminalize, such hate speech and all that. And it's now there, and we must be aware that it's coming. It's coming in force, and once it is there, criminalize anybody that is found making such derogatory remarks, because it's a threat. It's a threat to our existence as a people. And I think we need to move beyond that. So, and finally, it's about, he made mention of, I think all of them made mention of reforms. You're talking about the judiciary, the media. I think it is the generality of Gambian society that needs reforms. From Esanjai to Fatou Toure to everybody, we need reform as a people. We need to change the mindset. See, the mindset has not changed. That is why he said, it is not about removing Gorgimbo.
Yeah.
Okay. The right violations are still taking place in this country. We also what happened 3 years Jotna. We also what happened December 5th when election results, was it December 3rd or December 5th, when election results were announced, what happened at Lawyer Darboe's house. We also what happened in the Sabalis case. We saw police officers in this 21st century, under Adama Barrow, not under Yahya Jammeh, police officers making video, laughing, making fun of right violations that they have done. Where have we moved as a nation? What is the mantra never again about when these things are being repeated? And to an extent, we have normalized them. You see, I was so perplexed when, at a point, I was the 3 years Jotnam. By the way, did not find me. I was studying in the UK, and I was just in my room watching this live on Facebook, and I was also looking at people's status. So somebody put on her status, I mean, kill all of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, Jammeh is gone just 3 years ago. A Gambian will stand today and say police officers should kill civilians. Where have we moved as a nation? What is the difference? Then why not we leave Yahya Jammeh here? If we have people, citizens who still believe, well, for me, that is not an excuse. Yahya Jammeh for, don't you respect, I mean, anybody else is better than Yahya Jammeh. But what is the difference? Why did we remove Yahya Jammeh when we have Gambians who still think that, well, police officers should shoot and kill? So we have not moved anywhere as a nation. Our mindset have not changed. And the people that we are removing, say, remove Gorgibuf, remove Usman Sow, remove Usman Yankuba Sonko, that will not change anything if these institutions are reformed. And these institutions are made up by people. Societies don't exist in a vacuum. It is made up by people, and people must change their attitudes. Starting from the education system, the issue of ethics, and there's one thing also that is a problem in this country. It's a threat to our existence as a people that has to do with corruption, for instance. I mean, it's all part of the never again mantra, because for me, the Jammeh crimes were not only human rights violations, but these systematic human rights violations, but there were also economic crimes, for instance, in the country. These were all a threat to our existence as a people. So how do we address some of these things? It must start from the school system. Where people must be taught ethics. I know the Minister of Education, I think basic and secondary education, is coming up with a curriculum, a subject called, civic education. And in that civic education, they're going to have ethics, morality and all that not being taught. So it's important that we start, these things from the grassroots. The issue of even tribal, hate speech and all that cannot be addressed when we don't start teaching our kids at a younger age about the dangers of these things. Because for me, that is why I disagree with people to some extent when they say, tribalism, there's no tribalism in the Gambia, but tribal politics is perpetrated by politicians. Fine, you might agree that tribal politics is perpetrated by politicians, but tribalism, it starts from our homes. You have a kid that you tell that, be careful of these sources there, doing their social care. Like a kid that is starting from there, you build that mindset from a very young age, that he is able to identify who is a Manjago, who is a Wolof, who is a Mandinka, who is a Fula. And that stereotypical notion is there. That Fula, Jamfadro. So said the social ken. All of Futoirek, and all that. Do you understand? So it starts from our homes. It's not only politicians. We don't have to blame them. So that is why I said that it has to do with attitudinal change. The generality of the Gambian society needs that reform. So the reform is not only with institutions, but it must start from us.
To come to the judiciary, just 1 minute. About the court system, it was a victim, like everybody else, up to the time Jammeh left. But the quality of judging now is pretty good.
It's improved.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's about the individual. The independence is there. If you want to do things that are correct, that are right, morally acceptable, legally acceptable, you can do it.
I think for me it's the process. I mean, I think now a lot of us believe there's so much independence in the judiciary, but I think it's the process of how things drag. In dragging cases to 10 years, 5 years, 6 years, other people's rights are abused. And I think most of the reason why these cases are dragged is likely not even, it's just people not coming to, I mean that's it's not the independence, but really about, how the processes are dragged and how cases, especially, things like stealing and others, they cannot even have access to, the court system to be able to hear their cases. I think that's basically
human capacity, maybe?
I know, right? But finally, Lamin and Abdoulie, what's your final message?
Well, for me, considering what everybody said here, and what Esa just said, governance. Don't focus on individuals. They operate in a system. If the system is rotten, the best individuals will still not do the right thing.
Again, like everyone mentioned, the issue of reparations in terms of institutional reforms, legal reforms, we establish strong democratic institutions. This never again would always be a slogan unless there is genuine transformative process. So it's not only about, so where we are now, it is not about transitional justice. So now we should move to transformative justice. So we move to a state where there is genuine transformation in our governance architecture, in everything that we do. If everything falls into place, our courts will work effectively, our police will do the right thing, our education system will work right. But more importantly, I think whatever process we embark upon, victims must be central to any roadmap. So sometimes when we talk about prosecution, and we talked about it a lot here, I would have also wanted to talk a lot about what should be done for the victims, and what can be done for the victims should come from the victims themselves, because they should tell us what. Because normally in these transitional justice processes, it is experts, Western experts, local educated experts, you know, that people like me or people like that who are really rooted in this issue. We were both attending workshop 2 weeks ago and last week. So instead of us telling them what they want, for example, let them tell us exactly what they want, the sort of justice they want. Because the reason why I'm saying that, there must be criminal accountability. Some people must be prosecuted, not least Yaya Jammeh. But we must also think about the daily livelihood of these individuals. So, for example, government now decides that we will prosecute everybody. I should enjoy Sedi and everybody else. They will all be prosecuted. Then, at the end of that process, Sierra Leone spent $300 million. At the end of that process, for example, we end up spending $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, probably even more than that, because judges alone, a judge in the Sierra Leone Special Court, an international judge, was paid $250,000 annually, and that went for a long, long time. So, for example, at the end of that process, that judge walking away with $1.5 million, $2 million, dollars I'm talking about, when that victim of rape is only given $2,000. Is that justice?
Thank you.
Those are things, I think starting now, we should have a conversation. And I think the process has been done, government has come out, and to be honest, a lot of us, I think generally everybody thinks this was a good white paper. And I think now going forward, there should be a conversation as to what happens. This is a process. How do we take ownership of this process? And like the minister said, it should be victim-led, because at the end of the day, this is their case. It is the victims. If we didn't have the victims, we would not have had this TRRC. So thank you very much, Lamin. We're so honored to have you. I called him just this morning, and he left everything to be here. Thank you very much for coming. Abdoulie, Fatou, thank you very much. We will be having you often, because we really need to have these conversations going. But today we have guests here. Charles, can we pan to the team? We have Mansa Kolibojang Primary School and Secondary School from Brikama, and they are here with the students to just come and see us. They wanted to know how production is done, so they are here with the principal, and we want to thank them. We hope one day you can be sitting here as guests, also as co-hosts or as even hosts. You know, we are very grateful to have you here, and thank you very much for coming. We will have some of you maybe, you know, do a kids program on Kerr Fatou. But thank you very much for coming. So they are in Brikama. We will feature them on other programs. Thank you very much. And so you showing them, right? Thank you very much. And you have closed.
I haven't.
It
was only, see, you're being biased. It was only the two men that were close.
I'm a man and I did not close.
Say something.
I have to close. Okay, somebody wants to say something. Allow that. One of the...
the mics. Okay, come here.
Or just come closer. You can...
Come closer and sit next to Fatou.
Yes. But Fatou, we need to close. I'm closing statement.
Okay, sit there. Yeah, sit here. Okay.
Fair.
Sit next to Fatou. What's your name?
Thank you. Asanatu.
Asanatu.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go on.
I mean, I want to say good evening to everybody else watching this program. Indeed, I'm very amazed to be here. Wow. I never thought people could be this professional. I never thought like Gambians had this type of professionalism in them, like everybody working in tandem, coming here and then showing their dissatisfaction and at some point their satisfaction about some issues that have been made. Wow, I mean, today is like the happiest day of my life.
Wow.
Seeing Gambians doing these kind of things, I'm really amazed. And I mean, I want to be a lawyer, and this has really inspired me to do more and become like a professional lawyer and make sure that justice is given to everyone. As we all say, we sit and say that justice is a fair play, but in the long run, we see that justice has not just been a fair play in the Gambia because of the violations that have been done. But today, wow, I am really amazed, and I think that justice as a fair play will be done if all people are like you guys. I'm really amazed. Thank you.
Thank you. You are in the midst of the best lawyers in the Gambia.
Where are you from?
Brikama.
Okay, I went to Brikama Primary School. I come from Brikama, Brikama New Town. I'm a lawyer today. I come from a poor background. I'm a lawyer today due to hard work. So if you want to be a lawyer, there's nothing that stops you. The only thing that will stop you will be your own stuff. So if you work hard and believe in yourself, you will be a successful lawyer one day.
And you look like you are unstoppable.
I know, right? Let me tell you something. You are sitting in the midst of the best lawyers in this country. Mr. Darboe is the best constitutional lawyer this country has ever produced. He's from Gunjur. I mean, just from a humble beginning, from you know, not from like a family that is rich or so, and he's able to make it like Abdoulie. So today, look at her. She's been awarded by the Queen. You know, she's an MBE. That's why that's what we call her. So you're in the midst of great people here today, and we are so honored to have you and everybody here. And the way you speak, I know we have a lawyer in you already.
Thank you.
Well, for me, I mean, I would say thank you very much. I mean, this is the first time I'm actually sitting in the same platform with Mr. Darboe, but I have been really following you. Just today, it's funny, before I knew you were going to come in here, I had to go and read your article because I wanted to actually use some of your points to actually argue my case. So when Fatou said, oh, Darboe 2 is coming, because I knew of Abdoulie and Fatou, and I was like, oh, okay, because I had the paper opened and I was just reading, and this is something I do, especially when you write. I try to read to just you know, understand what's going on, because legal terms, to be honest, is definitely not my field. But again, as everyone just says, the white paper, because at the beginning I didn't get to say my reaction to the white paper, because it was an introduction I did, and then you asked about the reaction. So my reaction, to be honest, I was a bit emotional. At the same time, I was happy because I know some of these victims. I know some of them on a personal level, and I know what they have gone through. And I know even when TRRC started, the issues that they had within their households. Some husbands were not really, didn't want some of their wives to come out and say, this is exactly what happened to me. I had people I know that were raped, that, you know, had a lot of things, you know, being done to them. And then for them to actually come out and for them to admit and sit in public and say, this has happened to me. Definitely, as Fatou mentioned at some point, the culture of silence is being broken. Not yet. We still have some of the rings still tangled somewhere, but I think we believe that at some point they will all be broken. But again, government, people are really happy, and people are looking forward to implementations. We still have some who are still not very convinced that, but the general public, in general, everybody believes that definitely implementations would happen. And as I said, let's start from the easiest ones. Keep communicating with people. Then, you know, hope is already restored, and then we would believe more. And to these kids, I would say, keep pushing, keep working hard, keep studying. I also started from a very humble background, and here I am working at the medical at MRC.
Everybody wants to say they from
Please. But again, I mean, just believe in yourselves, because I sit here, but if I tell people that I studied biology, people would not believe me. But then communications has always been my passion, because I come from a home where my dad, I always have to say this, have always been pushing and encouraging me, and from when I was really young, I was very vocal, I was very open, I would talk about everything and anything. And because of, and this actually goes to the teachers. Okay, I had to go through a system of being in the science class because they just believed that I was too smart, so I have to study science. In reality, I did not want to study science. I wanted to do journalism or law or you know, a different field, which was arts. And then the perception was the people that study arts are not very clever. So it was the fallback. So I had to be forced to study science. So I did science until I finished, and I did biology, I did electrical engineering, I tried everything. But then this is what I enjoy. So I came here, I worked at MRC initially in the science section, but I left. Then I went to Standard Chartered, you know, to do what I really enjoy doing, which is just talking to people and all that. And now I am back at MRC, but I do communications, and I'm here. So teachers, do not force the students to go to the science because they have an A in mathematics and physics. Let them do what they want to do. So I'll be the one to close the program tonight, and thank you very much for having me. Until we come your way again.
She's a master's degree holder as well. Yes. Chinese, she's a master's degree holder as well. But yeah, we want to definitely thank the school. We also want to thank, like I said, thank the TRRC team, the commissioners, the lead counsel and his team, the lawyers, and everybody that worked on this project. I think they did Gambia good, and the country needed this. The country needed. Yesterday, you could see the relief from everybody, and then to the government as well. I think they did right by the people, coming out with such recommendations, accepting all of the recommendations. Danaka is commendable, and we want to thank the government, the former Attorney General, the current Attorney General for a great job. Now the task ahead is the implementation, and I think everybody, especially the civil society, will push to see that these things are implemented, and I think that's what everyone is looking forward to. Thank you very much to you all, and good night. And Say Toure has a fundraiser that is on Facebook right now. She wants us to support. If you're watching this program, please drop $10 or $5 for somebody who is going through some hardship, and she's raising funds for that person. We did the program on Kerr Fatou, and she picked it up. So thank you very much, Say, for always supporting. And good night to you all. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank
you. Good night.
Better and stronger as the sole ground operator at the Banjul International Airport. With an expansion in travel services, customers are assured of GIA's capacity to cater for all their travel needs, provided by professional, experienced, and ever-smiling staff. GIA's Hajj package and services, by far the best in the country, give the customers the opportunity for a memorable Hajj experience. For a more efficient cargo services, GIA means business as it launches its new multi-million-dollar ultra-modern cargo complex to revitalize and stimulate air transport. GIA, the pride of the Gambia.
Every day is a new opportunity to make sure our first impressions are always our best and to see possibilities on the horizon. To make our facilities and services more accessible and find freedom all around us. With a location proximity to active markets, with a liberal air transportation policy. That daily pursuit is how we turn everyday opportunities for you. For all destination marketing support, customized packages for new existing airlines and operators, and for a highly ranked tourist destination, the Gambia Civil Aviation Authority is here to serve. We regulate air transport, operate and manage BIA technical requirements merged with commercial considerations. We have experienced and well-trained aviation professionals to cater for your needs. For investment opportunities in building airport hotels, shopping malls, playground for children, do contact us on 4472-831, 4472-893. Gambia Civil Aviation Authority. We go beyond daily.